Welcome to Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and this is the Celtic State of Mind Bulletin. It's coming out a little later than usual. 12:30 is our staple time in the diary, but today, unfortunately, it's coming out a little bit later because we've been preparing for tonight's game. I will be here for the entire match with Stevie Mullen, who will be joining me in the studio in just a couple of hours' time. And that is a big question tonight. How will we line up? How will we line up to face Sarajevo tonight? There's a few other points in the world of Celtic, and I'm relying on you guys and girls on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter to get involved. Send in your comments, send in your questions, and we'll go through them one by one throughout this bulletin, which should last about an hour or so. But the match tonight is the big one. We're going to be looking at how Celtic will line up. That's going to be forced in many respects because there's a few injuries, unfortunately. We'll run through that. We'll also have a look at who else might be in the frame to start and who else is available who's been out over the last couple of weeks or so. I will also be talking about Ryan Sessegnon, who we mentioned on a Celtic State of Mind weeks and weeks ago, that he may be on Celtic's radar. A few people were surprised at that because of the nature of that deal and obviously the cost of that deal. And those concerns were raised again yesterday on Sky Sports News after our bulletin went out. I'll be in a Yeti. He'll be out for tonight's game, as will James Forrest. We'll have a wee chat about that. We'll also talk about what is the latest in terms of Odsonne Edouard, Olivier Encham and Christopher Ayer, who have been the three who have been speculated to have been on their way out of Celtic during this transfer window. Is that going to happen? Well, I don't think all three of them, that's for sure. Ferencváros qualified for the Champions League group stages, didn't they? So what a missed opportunity that's been. And the draw for the group stages will be this afternoon at 4 o'clock. And Celtic fans, obviously, our focus is elsewhere at the moment, but it will be a what might have been moment, unfortunately. So let's run through some of your comments first of all. And we have Sean Spillane, who is joining us on YouTube. So welcome to the show, Sean. Great to hear from you. If you are watching on YouTube, please subscribe to A Celtic State of Mind, as we will be continually producing content. Today, this bulletin is the first of 4 live broadcasts that we will be putting out from A State of Mind studios. So get involved on a daily basis. Raymond Haddon line up tonight similar to Sunday, with Eddie in for a Yeti. There's a question mark over Christie, obviously, as well, because Christie was injured at the weekend. Is he going to be fit? If not, who starts in his place? And keep the updates and the questions coming in via Twitter, Facebook and YouTube. Kevin Barry 67 comments that good afternoon to you, Kevin Barry. Mo El Yunusi and Eddie up top, or give Klamala a chance. I think it's under the circumstances, we've got one chance really tonight, one chance to get through and progress in the Europa League. And I don't think there are going to be any chances taken by Neil Lennon. We're going to play our strongest 11. You might think that is that sounds obvious, but there are games where obviously we can rest players, and we've done that over the last couple of weeks in relation particularly to Edouard. Edouard will certainly start tonight. I don't see any way that Klamala will start tonight's game. We need a victory, simple as that. It's a one-off game. I mean, I'll run through what I think should be the starting lineup. I don't know how often I've been correct this year, but Neil Lennon may not think along the same lines as myself, but I would certainly start. I think Barkas in goals. He's an absolute certainty, isn't he? Barkas to start every game now. He's done nothing to suggest otherwise, to be honest with you. I think that he came in for some criticism in the Scottish media, which I felt was, pretty unreasonable and unfair at the time. And we did speak about it on A Celtic State of Mind. I'm not sure where that came from. Are the press going to try and unsettle the squad again with stories such as that? It's unfortunate, but we get used to that, don't we, as Celtic supporters? Now, I think the sound dropped out for a few seconds there, so let me know that you are hearing us okay. No audio yet. Let me know if that's back, because it dropped out on us for a second there. A wee gremlin in the studio. Unfortunately, it does happen from time to time. And we're back on. Thanks, Owen. Keep us updated. It's always great when you let us know there, because sometimes I could be chatting away for minutes on end and I have no idea that the sound has dropped out. How did it happen? Who knows? But we're back. We are back. So Barkas and goals for me. I think the big question really is how do we line up? How do we shape that team? The formation is all important, but as we've said again, time and time again, every week almost, your starting lineup in terms of the shape of that and the formation, it's so adaptable at Celtic. We've got the personnel that when attacking, I think you're three at the back, and when defending, you can certainly get those wing backs defending as well. So that's going to change depending on the passage of play. But I would certainly start with the three centre halves. And does it pick itself at the moment? Well, Julien's back in. He's back in the squad, and I think prior to his back injury, he was a first pick. He was an automatic choice for Neil Lennon. But I don't think, under the circumstances, he's going to walk straight back into that team, but simply due to the performances of Nir Bitton. Nir Bitton, there's been loads of talk of Nir Bitton over the last few weeks, and quite rightly so, due to the fact that he's just slotted in seamlessly into that defence. He's an experienced player. He knows the club so well. He was signed by Neil Lennon first time round. And as a few people pointed out when we first seen him, it was Beaton with one T, now goes with a double T. He's an international class player. He's very much, he looks very relaxed and cool, regardless of where he plays, be that in midfield or in defence. But I think everybody would agree now, particularly over the last 3 games, that his best position is in the centre of defence. He can play on the right-hand side of that defence. He can play right across the back, actually. And it just adds a calming kind of influence. Yeah, he's a ball player, but, very much more in the mould of someone who likes to spray passes all over the park. You see a lot of the searching cross-field passes from Beaton, finding his man almost always. So he's a first pick now. He's come in and he's taking the chance. Someone mentioned earlier on, Kevin Barry, you mentioned about Klimala. Has he done enough when he's had his appearances to be chosen in the first 11? I don't think he has at the moment, particularly when you look at the form of Eduard and the other player who is going to partner him tonight, and I'll speak about him once we get to the forwards. Partnering Nir Bitton for me, still Duffy. Don't think he had his best game in a Celtic jersey against Hibs, but he is still a man that I think he adds a reassuring presence. He's got that presence at the back at centre half alongside Bitton. And one of the men who has been subject to some speculation around his possible departure from Celtic, Christopher Ajer. And Chris Ajer, for me, has had a good season so far. He seemed to be, I don't know if he was blamed, he was certainly dropped after the Kilmarnock game where we drew 1 each. But Ajer, I think, has been pretty assured alongside Duffy. Some people complain that he does go to ground too soon or too freely. He sometimes gives away free kicks where you think there's a better option. He sometimes wraps his arms around opposing players when he's behind them. But he is still, for me, a first choice for Celtic. And we'll have a wee chat about the speculation around his departure from the club, which I hope doesn't materialise. I would play with Brown and McGregor in the centre of defence, the centre of midfield. Earlier on this season, it's almost an annual thing, an annual event where people are writing off Scott Brown. Came into the side against Hibs and played excellent. He's been an ever present for Celtic, and I don't think that we can afford to rest him at the moment. People might argue that Turnbull deserves a jersey, but I don't know if that's where Turnbull's going to slot in. We'll talk about Turnbull's possible position later on. Callum McGregor, automatic choice, outstanding every single week. And I think it was Stubbsy was talking about him being an 8 or 9 out of 10 every single week. And I've got to agree with that. He's so consistent. Sometimes he's so consistent that we take him for granted because that's what we expect from Callum McGregor. But McGregor and Brown in the centre of midfield. Frimpong, similarly to Beaton and El Yunusi, has come in recent weeks and made the first team jersey his own, and that really is a message that goes out to a lot of the other players who are on the sidelines, such as Ncham, such as Klamala, and people who are coming into the squad in recent weeks, such as Lee Griffiths, who we speak about regularly on the podcast. You've got to take a chance. That's exactly what Frimpong's done. If he has a game similar in impact to the match against Riga last week, he's going to be one of our star men. I think we'll use him as an outball again. He causes defences so much trouble running at them with that direct style of his. He's an exciting player. He's still young, and I think he's claimed that first team jersey as his own, and it's an example to other players coming into the side at the moment. Greg Taylor still gets a start for me wide left. We all know, and we've discussed at length, that he's perhaps a better defender than going forward, but he's no slouch. He is no slouch. He's got a lot of the ball in all of the games he's played, and he has set up quite a few goals. So he answered a few critics, I think, against Hibs by setting up one of our goals at the weekend there, and he will certainly start this evening again. I think one of the most difficult positions to choose at the moment is in the player who's playing in front of the midfield two, just behind the two strikers. And ordinarily, I would be picking Ryan Christie in that position, but I think obviously after his knock at the weekend, that may not be the case. And then it would beg the question, do you start Turnbull? Yeah, he did look good against Hibs, absolutely, and credit has to be given to him. But for tonight's game, under the circumstances, and I'm not saying Turnbull's untested, because obviously he's played a lot of domestic football, but I think we've seen enough of Ncham on the European stage to know that we could put him in that side tonight. He did a good job against Riga. I know he came off, but that was more tactical than due to his performance, and it worked out well, didn't it, in the end? So I think Ncham, for me, would start if Christie obviously is injured, which I believe he is, and up front, starting two would be Edouard with El Yunusi playing just off him. So the interesting three for me at the moment is El Yunusi, Frimpong and Beaton, because they wouldn't have made my starting 11 even 3 or 4 weeks ago, maybe before the Livy game. So they've come in and they've played well, and they've got the jersey, and it's up to them to keep it now. So that's how I would start. On the bench, obviously, we're not going to have the 9. But what I would expect to see is Turnbull on there. Julien, hopefully, will be on the bench. I think Klamala will be on the bench because he's fitter than Griffiths, but you never know under the circumstances again. Do we put in Griffiths there just in case we're coming to the end of the game, or even extra time? Should it get to that stage and we're looking for an impact sub? Is Klamala the guy you would call on? Would you feel confident calling on Griffiths with such a lack of game time? It's undoubtedly now the biggest game of the season so far after the Champions League exit. And, Griffiths, he might be able to play 10, 15 minutes, but we know what he can do. Is he a better option, less fit than Klamala, fully fit? That's a question I'm putting out to you guys. How would you set that up on the bench? So let's get back to some more of your suggestions and your comments. And we have Mick07 on YouTube. Has no one picked up this game is on TV tonight? Yeah, we have, Mick. We were asking a question just a couple of days back. A wee bit concerned as to how we were going to cover the game, because at that point it wasn't announced, but thankfully, the good guys at Celtic, the media team there, were able to announce that. So that was brilliant. And it was a great gesture by the club, obviously, because we've got it on the season ticket. So we'll be watching that game here, and we will be coming to yourselves half an hour before the game for the pre-match with Stevie Mullen, who is the St Roch's president, and he talks a great game of football, and he's very popular on a Celtic State of Mind's broadcast. We'll also be covering the half-time interval of 15 minutes and about half an hour after the game. unless it goes to extra time and penalties, and we might be a wee bit quicker than half an hour because it'll be getting a bit late and Stevie needs to travel home. So I'm hoping it doesn't get to that stage. I've already told you what my predicted 11 is going to be, and that is with Neil Lennon in mind. It's not what I think should be the starting 11. I think that's how Lenny will line up. How do I think the game will go? Well, there's the thing. It was tight against Riga, wasn't it? I think a lot of the predictions from the Axom camp were around the 3-0 mark, 3-1, that type of thing. We won 1-0. We were glad of that last minute goal. Yes, it was a dominant performance, but we didn't turn that into goals. I think at the weekend there we saw what can happen when that free-flowing football turns into goals, and it was such a dominant performance again against Hibs. I think the difference against the High Bees was that Jack Ross made a game of it. He came out and he played, and all credit to him. But you know what happens is the result of that is that you might end up on the end of a tanking. I think what Jack Ross probably wanted to do is make the breakthrough and then park the bus after that. And that is going to be a feature of many of the teams that we play this season. I don't think that Riga, did I call them Braga before? That's memories of a past life, unfortunately, in Europe. But I think Riga, you know, they didn't come out and try and go toe-to-toe with Celtic, didn't they? It was all the onus was on Celtic against them, and they were difficult to break down, but break them down we did. The reason we broke them down really was Frimpong. He created 3 goal-scoring opportunities in the last 10 minutes of the game. Absolute dynamite down the right, and the final opportunity that he created was scored spectacularly. Brilliant finish by El Yunusi. So I think tonight, Celtic, I think both teams will score. I do think both teams will score, but Celtic will replicate the result of last season against Sarajevo away, where we won 3-1. So I am going to go for a 3-1 victory for Celtic. I know that it's at a different venue. I know that Sarajevo will have changed from last season, but so have Celtic. You know, we've brought in 5 new players in this window, and they're all first-team players, even though the likes of Ayeti is injured for tonight's game, unfortunately, because, you know, I was looking at Ayeti and Eddie, but even if they're partnering, where do you play El Yunusi? Because he certainly doesn't deserve to be dropped at the moment. Does he go back to Christie's role and play behind the front two? Loads of options. Good headache for Neil Lennon tonight, but I do expect us to win 3-1. I would expect Edouard to get in amongst the goals as well. Now, here we go. Jean-Paul II, I don't buy this experience. If you're good enough to play, if you're good enough, you play. So Turnbull to start. I did consider Turnbull, Jean-Paul, and you know, he's one. It wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't actually surprise me, because he's definitely one of the options, isn't he? When you're looking at that position there that normally Christie would be in, you're then looking at Encham. We know what Encham can do. He's a known quantity for Celtic, and in particular in Europe. And maybe I'm playing safe there. Maybe that's why I'm putting Encham in, because I'm playing a wee bit safer. It would be a wee bit bolder to play Turnbull in there. But let's see what happens if Neil Lennon does and goes with your prediction there. Experience. Yeah, I think I'm going with experience with Encham, but sometimes the unknown quantity can work in the favour of the player, and also the unknown quantity against that team. Do they know much about Turnbull? So, yeah, I take your point. That will be an interesting selection. Helen McCallum not on TV tonight, but it is on the season ticket pass, Helen, so looking forward to that. Follower Celtic, welcome back. It's great to see you getting involved via Twitter. Afternoon, PJ, fantastic news that Griffiths in the squad and fit. Will we see him play? That's a big question we've been asking all season, to the point that some people are tired of hearing me talking about Lee Griffiths and Tommy Rogic. But, you know, it's one of the things, you just want all your best players fit, don't you? That's what it comes down to. It's not favouritism. Although I do love both players. I kind of expected Rogic to be away. I think we all did, didn't we? We had all kind of admitted defeat in relation to Tommy Rogic. It looked as though he was going to be leaving for about 4 million, which, you know, a couple of seasons ago would have been a steal. It really would have been. We were talking about Tommy Rogic back in the day there. He was up in the £8-10 million category, wasn't he? A couple of pre-seasons ago. Had he gone, that's the kind of the bracket we were talking about. But he hasn't played a lot of football in the last 2 seasons. And I think that's why people had more or less got to the point of resignation in terms of him leaving the club. Thankfully, he's not. And I say thankfully because I think that Tommy Rogic can be a very useful addition to Neil Lennon's squad this season. And I think that, although I'm all for youth, I really am all for youth. And we talk about youth football a lot in a Celtic State of Mind, and we get a lot of kind of youth coaches in to talk the game and talk it up as well. Under the circumstances, if you've got 9 subs domestically, and obviously that's reduced in the European games, then you want every one of the subs to be either a game changer or someone that can step in, like El Hamid would, if we've got an injury, And I think players such as Griffiths and Rogic are those two that are next in line. I think previously to that, we had players like Beaton, who you knew could step in, very much like El Hamid, who is no longer a first choice due to the form of Beaton. Players like Frimpong, we've seen what he could do last season. He hadn't done it up until recently, but he was a great option on the bench. And players like Ncham or El Yunusi, who have spent some time on the bench. And I just think, Griffiths and Rogic are that type of player. Behind them, eventually, once they get fit, you're then looking at Sorrell and you're looking at Klamala. At the moment, they two guys are probably ahead of Rogic and Griffiths in the fitness stakes. So the bench is going to be very important for Celtic tonight. Yeah, Griffiths is in the squad. I don't think we'll see him play, unfortunately. I would love to see him play. James Downey, Ayeti been missing is a bit of a nightmare. He's been fantastic, such a goal poacher. He hasn't half, hasn't he? I mean, look at his goal scoring records. When you start looking at goals per minute rather than goals per game, then you've got a player there. And when you look at the fee as well that we paid West Ham, it's a big fee for Celtic. It is. It's still a big fee for Celtic. I know that we invested £9 million in Edouard, which was an excellent move on Celtic's part at that time. Got to give Brendan Rodgers credit, because I'm sure he would need to have pushed for that outlay at that time, a record fee, which had stood for about 20 years. Chris Sutton being the record buy before then. I think Neil Lennon was the same amount, 6 million. But Ayeti comes in for 5 million, which is a big buy for Celtic, but really in the great scheme of things, it's looking like a bit of a steal, isn't it? If you use Edouard as the kind of barometer of what you get for 9 million quid, I'd love to see what Ayeti's going to be on goal-wise by the end of this season. Keep the guy fit, of course. There was a few concerns because he was unfit when we brought him in, and he pulled up with an injury at the weekend, but these things happen with muscular injuries, don't they? He's been absolutely brilliant. And the big thing for me, James, is I want to see that partnership with Edouard develop. I keep saying that on the podcast like a broken record. But it does excite me to see those two developing a partnership as a front two. Well, for a couple of reasons. It means we're playing two up front, doesn't it? But I think we also missed the Dembele-Edouard potential, didn't we? We didn't get the chance to see that. And I think any club with a big budget would do well to, at some point in the future, marry those two up. Hopefully it's not anytime soon. And James is saying that Edouard is a great backup. Well, it's funny that, isn't it? Because, he loses a wee bit of form and yet he's fit at the moment, and if you were picking one, that would be a difficult pick at the moment, James. Simply because Eddie's lost a wee bit of form. I think he's played a lot of football. He's come back fairly early from an injury. I think he's been rested a couple of times domestically with the European games in mind. Neil Lennon knows that he's prioritising in terms of his squad, and he's rotating the squad as well. Timothy Baird on YouTube. Hail. Great shows you're doing, by the way. And I'll say French Ted, first G and 3 Scud Celtic tonight. French Eddie for the first goal, I think. 3-0 for Celtic. Listen, I wouldn't bet against that, Timothy. Thanks for your comments about the show. The Celtic State of Mind bulletin is something that we want to be a staple part of your daily diet. And I do want to put it out at 12:30 every single day. So that's where I schedule it. From time to time in the studio, it's not always possible. Sometimes things crop up. Sometimes we have to get other things in place because we've got a few other shows on the go at the moment. So apologies that we're a wee bit later. I know that you need to have that schedule in your life. I certainly need to have that routine as well. So we've gone out today a wee bit later. And in a wee while, I'll be going to meet Stevie Mullen and we'll be coming back for the pre-match. But we've still got quite a lot to go through today, and we'll get through as many as we possibly can. Via Facebook, Turnbull in for Christie. Not a bad shout. I don't totally disagree with you. I'm just thinking, under the circumstances, that Neil Lennon might play what probably is a safe bet by playing in Chatham there, because of his European experience, with Turnbull as a fantastic option to bring on if we're trying to unlock a tight defence. I think if we do that, as we did against Hibs, then it's going to be a 3-0 win. I go with what Timothy said earlier on. Scott Graham, welcome to the show, Scott. Hope you're enjoying this via YouTube. And if anybody is actually watching on YouTube, subscribe to us. I think we're up at about 2,500 subscribers. I mean, we don't, the thing is, it's not a numbers game in that respect. What we want to do is we want to get this out to as many Celtic fans as possible, free of charge. We realise that you can get your Celtic fix on loads of different platforms and from loads of different sources, many of whom we know. We know quite a lot of the guys. Stevie Murray at the Celtic Underground, long-time friend of mine. Stevie, he's going to have to come in here again sometime soon when he's able, when we're allowed, and we can bring him in. So I've got a huge amount of respect for a lot of the content that's been created out there, and absolutely brilliant for Celtic fans. And all I can say is we try and do it our own way. We don't try and copy anybody. Not saying anybody else does, but we try and do it our own way. And I think the live bulletin's a good way to go. We're going to keep the live broadcasts as regular as possible. As I say, today we're going to have 4. This is your first of a 4-parter. And talking of parters, by the way, just a wee deviation, because you've got to talk about other things as well when you're in your flow. But what about the Peaky Blinders? What about the Peaky Blinders, 5 series. I've just finished it. Just finished it the other night, last episode. And there's a wee hole in my life here. There's a wee gap there that I need to fill. So I put it out there on Twitter. How do I follow that up? What do I watch next? It's a bit of a blank canvas. I've not really watched much on TV, believe this or not, for a good 7 or 8 years. Hence the reason I just started watching Peaky Blinders. And people were questioning whether or not I had a telly. I do have one. It just doesn't get switched on very often. But I am using my nights to catch up. And the winning vote was on The Sopranos. So let me know what you think. Let me know what you think. Don't spoil it for anybody who's not seen Peaky Blinders. But that last episode, bit of a cliffhanger. What's your thoughts on that as well? Scott Graham, hoping for a good result tonight, but taking nothing for granted. Listen, Scott, that's actually a decent warning sign for me, because I was sitting here this time last week talking about a 3-0 victory against Riga. We went out, we didn't have it all our own way, although we did have the possession. 71% of the possession. Very dominant. But under those circumstances, all it takes is a breakaway or a mistake or a bad refereeing decision, and you're a goal down and it's hard to come back. So I'm not taking it for granted. I think I'm maybe a bit buoyed by the result and the performance on Sunday, which is why I'm suggesting maybe a 3-0 win for Celtic tonight. And I really do hope so, because going back to one of the points I made earlier, we're now looking at Ferencváros, who are in the pot. They're in pot 4 today, aren't they? And you're looking on with a bit of awe at 4 o'clock when that draw is made, because ordinarily, had we turned up and picked the right team and done what we think we can do, we could have been in there. However, it's all wishful thinking, isn't it? Ferencváros are there on merit. They deserve to be there. Celtic don't, because we didn't do what we think we're capable of doing on that night. 5 weeks ago now? 4.5, 5 weeks ago. So, Ferencváros are in the pot. I do see it as a missed opportunity. It's very frustrating that Celtic could have progressed. Obviously, there was another round to play against Molde, a team that we know well from recent past. So, Ferencváros are in the pot, and they will be into the Champions League riches. What we need to concentrate on is where we are at this moment in time. And we need to get into the Europa League group stages, and then we can excite ourselves with the teams that we face at that point. So I'm not taking anything for granted there, Scott, but it is a timely reminder. Facebook user, the reason that your face and your name isn't showing up on the broadcast is simply because StreamYard asks you to do a very quick registration process. There's no catches. It just allows them to use your information when you're commenting on the live broadcast. So apologies that I don't know who I'm talking to, but thanks for getting involved. And you're suggesting Barkas, Ayer, Duffy, Beaton, Frimpong, Taylor, Brown, McGregor, and Cham, El Yunusi and Eddie. So it's the same team as myself, but in brackets or Turnbull for Ncham. And yeah, absolutely. That was the one that I was on the fence about, and I went for experience and I played safe. And James Downey, Klamala won't play. Lenny will go up with one up and it'll be Edouard. If he does, what formation do we play, James? Do we still play El Yunusi behind him? How would you set up if that is the way that he goes? If that's the way he goes with one up top, where else do you see the changes being made? John Hutchison, hi Paul. What was your views on the Rangers supporter comparing James Tavernier to the King? Well, John, we don't talk much about them really. We talk about them when we're about to play them, but yeah, it came to my attention. It certainly came to my attention. Here's the thing, by the way. Maybe because I'm not in the Glasgow kind of area, I don't know. But I don't tend to listen to any of the radio shows in question. I really don't. I don't listen to the phone-ins. I did probably back in the day. And I've got some brilliant footage of the 1990s kind of, not even always the phone-ins, but it was back in those days, it was harder to get your media. It was more difficult to get your media, and a free-thinking media, a media which doesn't exist now in many aspects. But sometimes it was good to hear fans' views back then. I don't tune in these days, John, but I'm aware of what you're talking about. I think it's just ridiculous, isn't it? I mean, it's a ridiculous comment. We've heard these comments before. Who's comparable to Larsson? Who's comparable to Larsson in the modern day? He is a modern day legend, isn't he? And you ask the question, will you see his like again? You get some flashes of brilliance from players, don't you? What I don't think we will see is someone at the standard of Larsson staying at any Scottish club for 7 years. That's what we won't see these days. We'll never see that again. We might see a player coming in, and we've had a few with bags and bags of talent, different positions. So Van Dijk, for example, goes on, top 3 Ballon d'Or player, best defender in the world, and part of that development was at Celtic Park. But you can't put him in the same category. You can't put him in the same category of quality as Larsson, because Larsson did it over a sustained period of time. He'd done it for 7 years, and he'd done it after a serious injury, when that shin bone snapped. So many of us just thought that was the end of Henrik Larsson as we knew him. But he came back stronger. I mean, he actually came back stronger. He came back better. He came back more prolific. The assists that he was involved in, the secondary assists, which I know is a marker now for a lot of the analysts, starting moves, laying players on, scoring goals, defensive play, work rate, completed passes, heading ability. Henrik Larsson had it all, and we know that Sir Alex Ferguson tried to sign him whilst he was at Celtic, and many times he could have left, and I think he put in a good shift for us, didn't he? He really did. And when the time came, I think we were all of the opinion that it was, we would have rather he stayed, of course we would. But he left with our blessing, I think is what I'm trying to say. He left with our blessing, and we wanted to see him go on and do it at a higher level. And what I mean by that, I don't mean Celtic, I mean league-wise, I mean competition-wise. And he went on to do that with Barcelona. And he was, instrumental in Barcelona winning the Champions League. And the players that played alongside him, Samuel Eto'o, Ronaldinho, some of the greatest players in the world in modern football. Ronaldinho, for me, skill-wise, probably is up there. But we've all got our own views on that, and it's a lot of it is opinions. And we're living in times where we're seeing greatness, and we have seen greatness for several years in Ronaldo and Messi. And, we'll probably look back on that and think, wow, we ended up taking that for granted, because it was just year on year for decades, really, with the guys. And we're still scoring goals now. But when Eto'o and the like, and Ronaldinho, what a player, talk about Larsson the way that they do, and Henry as well. Larsson was special, and he's probably the last that we'll see of his ilk. And what I mean by that, we might get a player similar in stature, but he will not stay at Celtic for 7 years. So to compare him to the aforementioned Rangers player, I'm sorry, I'm not having it. It's ridiculous. They shouldn't even be mentioned in the same breath. And very much like Chris Boyd, people going about the goals that Chris Boyd scored. Come on. Not even in the same ballpark. And so Larsson, King of Kings, always will be the King of Kings. It's Glasgow Roads. Great to hear from you. And you are commenting via Twitter. El Yunusi and Frimpong to start. Plenty of pace from the start and get it done early. I think so. I really do. I think we'll go hell for leather. We'll come storming out the traps even. I think we will go for that part in the play and try and get a goal. And once we get that goal, that's when things need to open up. They can't defend at that point, and then it's an open game, and we can beat them at that game. We can beat a lot of teams at that game, going toe to toe. We find it difficult to break down teams. We've done it, but we do find it difficult to break down teams who park the bus. So yeah, we're going out there for a goal. Once we get that goal, things will open up. Gary McDowell, welcome to the show and a good afternoon to you. Sorry everybody that we're a wee bit late or later than normal. That's just because we're juggling a wee bit just to get the 4 broadcasts out today. I will be joined by a good friend of mine, Stevie Mullen. Stevie is, for me, he's great. He's great as a pundit for a Celtic state of mind. He's got a good insight. He played the game. And by all accounts, he was a fantastic player. He was in at Motherwell for a spell, played at Celtic Park in the reserve game against the great Paul McStay. But made his name really on the kind of junior stage. And the players that you speak to, the players that I've spoken to, ex-players over the last few months, speak so highly of him as a player. But I think he knows the game. And when you talk to someone who knows the game like that, it's brilliant. It's a great insight. We've had a few of them on the show over the last few months. So brilliant. Sean Hill. For me, it's El Yunusi and Klimala. Well, there's the thing, and I'm not giving Klimala a hard time. I maybe did at the beginning of the season. I maybe did write him off. But what Klimala has done for Celtic and for Neil Lennon, he's certainly been a stopgap at that stage. What I mean by that is that we had no option of Lee Griffiths, did we? And then we were working on the Yeti deal. We're looking back to last season and this season, you know, in the game against Ferencváros, where apparently we didn't have a striker who was ready to start the game. So Klimala, he's done what's been asked of him. Has he done enough though to be a first pick tonight if Edouard's fit? And my answer to that is no, Sean. I don't think he has. Is he an option on the bench? I think that Lenny will probably go for him prior to choosing Griffiths, and that's down to fitness. Whether or not my heart's ruling my head on that one, probably, but I think that Griffiths would be good to have on the bench tonight. I really do. Just the circumstances of the game, a one-off game in Europe, which we're not used to because it's normally the final if you're playing a one-off game, but this season has been unusual. So it's a one-off tie. We might need that 15 minutes from Griffiths that I think even an 80% fit Griffiths can give you. Someone who's not match fit because he's not played any matches since the bounce game against Hibs. Stephen Forbes, thank you very much for getting back involved in the bulletin. If we progress, and it's a big if there with the Capitals this evening, I'm convinced we'll draw Arsenal for a KT reunion. It would be a shame we wouldn't be there for him to experience the love and appreciation from the majority. See, that's an interesting one because obviously there was an interview given earlier on this season where he was speaking to Cy Ferry, former Celtic player, and he was talking about the reaction of his move to Arsenal, wasn't he? And I think it surprised a lot of Celtic fans because most of us don't feel like that at all. I think we were disappointed because we loved the guy. We were disappointed because he came through, he was one of us. I think he still is one of us. Going back to the Peaky Blinders at the top of the show there, I loved that Arthur Shelby video with the Kieran Tierney top. Loved it. And I love when a young player comes through and does what Kieran Tierney did, and it was so disappointing when he left. But let's look at the bigger picture, I think. And if and when Kieran Tierney comes back to Celtic Park, be that as an Arsenal player or be that to celebrate 10 in a row, he'll be welcome back, won't he? I don't think anybody on here will disagree. So the Celtic state of mind boys certainly would welcome him back. We're going to go through a few other points that are coming through. Michael the Boy, welcome to the show. You're commenting via Twitter, and we've still got 20 minutes to go. Plenty of time to get your comments in. Got to be 3-5-2, Paul. What formation am I even playing? I've got the three centre halves. I've got Brown and McGregor. They're central midfielders, but obviously dropping back and McGregor pushing forwards where necessary. You've got Taylor as a left wing back, Frimpong as a right wing back. That role that Christie normally occupies, which I'm going to start with Encham tonight, further up the park, is, what is it? What's it even called? I'm not going to call it a false nine. No chance, no using that terminology. But it's maybe like a support man role in the old Championship manager days. It's in front of the two central midfielders behind the strikers, but there's probably a new term that I'm not going to adapt or adopt even. And then up front, Eddie and El Yunusi. That's not even a front two, is it? Because El Yunusi is not an out-and-out striker. Edouard is, with El Yunusi playing off him. So it's a bastardised 3-5-2, I think, Michael, so I don't disagree with you. Here's one, Omar Khalil. I'm a new Celtic fan, couldn't have picked a better football club. I often wonder what would happen if you just landed in a country like Scotland, with the same kind of state of mind that you've got, and you've been brought up somewhere else on a different planet, in a different land somewhere. You would choose Celtic, wouldn't you? You definitely would. I don't think most of us don't choose. That's the thing. Most of us don't choose. And I'm intrigued when someone does. And we had a brilliant interview recently with Chaz, New K Burden. Chaz is a fantastic writer, and he's written for a whole host of publications. He's also written for a Celtic State of Mind. And Chaz was a childhood Arsenal fan, and he changed allegiance and he became a Celtic fan, and I loved his story. I absolutely loved his story because it can happen. I don't write that off. I really don't. But the way Chaz tells that story is intriguing. It's really interesting. So we captured it on a podcast during lockdown, so it was via the Zoom. Still good quality though, so give that a listen or read his article on axom.net and give him a follow as well on Twitter because he's great chat on the social media. So we agree, you couldn't have picked a better football club, absolutely. Who did I choose in German football? St. Pauli. Who do I support in English football? Don't support anybody in English football, because to be a supporter you need to actually support them. I've always liked Liverpool. I've always liked Liverpool Football Club. And that's what was interesting for me back in the time where I interviewed John Barnes, because there was posters of John Barnes on my bedroom wall. I shared the bedroom with my brother when we were kids, and he loved Liverpool. He was a Celtic fan, but he loved Liverpool. First game I ever seen Celtic playing him was against Liverpool. We had the Kenny Dalglish thing. My brother bought the Anfield wrap, which he still has on 7-inch vinyl, and there was the whole connection really. Going right back to Shankly and Steen, the Hillsborough tragedy, and I think the fans of the clubs became closer after that game, because obviously we had the match up at Celtic Park to get the Liverpool people back playing and get them back amongst their own. And we've got a relationship with Liverpool, but I'm not a supporter because I don't support them. I was down at Anfield a couple of weeks ago, but and I have been to games. I have been to games at Anfield as well. So yeah, Celtic and Celtic reserves would be my old school choice. There we go. The DG of choice: Deadwood, Better Call Saul, Breaking Bad, Ozarks, in that order, Paul. Thank you very much. And I do take recommendations, and I'm making a wee list here. As sad as that might sound, but I've got a wee bit more time at night if the missus is working on a back shift, or when she's in, we watch Peaky Blinders. And I'm working my way through them because I love film. I actually made one before, not that type. I made a documentary about Celtic Smiler, Nearly Mocking. And it was brilliant. What an experience that was. And I worked on another documentary, which was an adaptation on my first book, The Quality Street Gang. And that's on a dusty shelf somewhere. And whether or not we'll ever see it, who knows. So yes, I do like some quality television, so thank you for that. Francie Dub LU is welcoming Omar Khalil to the family. It's a big welcome because we like to spread our wings and get you under that wing, don't we? Hugh Connolly. Hi Paul, 3-1 to Celtic. Think they will get in behind the defence before they get it together. That is what Frimpong's good for, isn't it? Getting in behind that defence, using his trickery, using his pace. They'll know all about Frimpong. They'll have done their homework on him. What do Scottish clubs do? They kick him. They double up on him. And I think they'll do the same tonight if they've got any sense, to be honest. And that's why it would be good to have that second out ball. So no disrespect to Taylor, but, to have that option out left, which I think, or I thought we had. I thought we had that in El Yunusi. But what this season has shown us is that he's better in the centre of the park. He certainly is better in the centre of the park. Who else do we have out there? Jamesy Forrest, on his game, he can switch, but he's injured. Mikey Johnston scored there last season. He's still injured. Do we still need somebody out there? Will Ryan Sessegnon be that man? And that takes us on to the point. So we spoke about Sessegnon on the podcast, and we don't profess to be in the know. We don't profess to be one of these people or podcasts who are in the know. But from time to time, we do get some information. We do get some sources giving us info, and sometimes it's just their opinion. But, we did mention Sessegnon before. That story got a bit of credibility after some of the decent journalists ran with it yesterday, and then it appeared on Sky Sports News, and it's been appearing during the broadcast this morning, I've noticed. But the stumbling block, or what could be problematic, I think, would be the loan fee. What are they looking for a £20 million player for a season? What would they be looking for? That would be interesting. Would Celtic be prepared to pay that? What are we talking here for a loan fee for a £20 million player who's not going to play for Spurs this season? He's out of the picture. Would you pay a couple of million? Is it as high as 4, 5 million? What are they looking for? I think 2 million, 3 million would be fine. Anything above that might be the stumbling block. Celtic Rab, welcome to the show, and a big shout out to you. You have supported a Celtic state of mind for a long time, so thank you very much for that. You share it constantly on social media, and you think that we should go with 2 up top against Sarajevo, El Yunusi and Edouard. I agree with that. That was part of my supposed starting 11, so yeah, absolutely agree with that. And via Facebook, Leeds, I heard, are in for Sessegnon. Would love him at Celtic, but can see him going to Leeds. Heard the fee is 5 million. That's my fear. That's my fear. £5 million. What could you do with that? What could you do with that? Celtic will be looking at 5 million and thinking, can we bring someone in who fits the mould, who fits the model? Because we're never going to sign Sessegnon permanently. We know that. We accept that as Celtic supporters. But there are certain players, we spoke about this when we're playing the market, when we're playing the loan market, there's certain players we can bring in of a quality that we couldn't buy. El Yunusi, arguably, is one of those players. Would we push, maybe after this season, is there a deal in the works for El Yunusi on a permanent level after this season, around the £8 million mark? Would we push it to 8 million, depending on his performances? Possibly. But what you're looking at with Sessegnon is a 20-year-old guy, who cost £20 million just last year. Bags of potential, might not be in the plans for the next season or two at Spurs, and they're looking at him and thinking, well, if he gets game time at Celtic, if he gets European experience at Celtic, that's better for him than playing under 23 football for Spurs. So you can see how that deal is going to work for all the parties. Where it falls down is the £5 million figure. Would Celtic pay 3? Probably. We probably would. Would we pay 5? Probably not. I don't think we would. I think what we would look at there is a player that we could invest in, that is our player, that has a sell-on value, and, it's more long-term than just a stopgap, which Sessegnon would be. But thanks for that shout-out from Facebook. That is, it's interesting to see that, because I think you're probably on the money with that as well. Kenny McAdam, Paul, a player just behind the striker, used to be known as an auxiliary forward. I'd prefer we played with 2 recognised strikers though. I would have no hesitation playing Griff with Eddie. Apologies for the short liquid breaks because I'm doing all the talking here and it's incredible how quickly you need a drink. A soft drink, that is. So yeah, I agree with that. The front two, I would class it as a front two, Kenny, if we're playing somebody like Edouard alongside Ayeti or Edouard alongside Griffiths. We saw that last season. It looked like a decent partnership. But if you're playing Edouard with El Yunusi, then I agree with you. You're not playing with a straight out front two, are you? El Yunusi's kind of behind him as this auxiliary forward. And then behind him again, you've then got your Encham or Christie type player, Turnbull perhaps. So that is very interesting, and I do agree with you. But I would prefer to have 2 up front, but tonight I think we're going to start with Eddie and El Yunusi as well. Sean Martin, you think that we go all out for Sessegnon? It's a no-brainer. Yeah, he's a quality player, isn't he? And he really would add a big bit of balance really to that team. Who is going to be dropped for a player like Sessegnon? Well, it's going to be Taylor. And I think Taylor's done well. I think he's done well. He's had a lot of stick, but he doesn't have that impact that Frimpong has in an offensive sense. And in a situation like tonight, where, you know, if it goes along the Riga lines and we're sitting there with 10 minutes to go and it's nothing each, we know what Frimpong done in that last 10 minutes. They double up on him. We want to have the same threat down left, don't we? We want to have that same threat down the left. And Sessegnon would give us that. Various other players would give us that. He who shall not be named, Paddy Roberts, would maybe give us that. And again, I'm throwing that in there. He's been mentioned speculatively. A lot of Celtic fans don't really entertain the idea, but he knows the club, doesn't he? John Francis McKeown will set up with Mo and Eddie as a 3-5-1-1. Yep, I'm hoping Griff gets an outing tonight. Again, John, it's an interesting one because we talk a lot about Lee Griffiths, and I sometimes wonder if it's my heart ruling my head because I love the wee guy. Even though he does a lot wrong off the park, mainly, he has done anyway. We still want to see him back in a Celtic jersey. We really do. Is tonight that night? Do we bleed him in a domestic game against a level of opposition that we would maybe expect to be winning at home? Is that a better environment for Griffiths? Or does he thrive on a pressure situation like tonight with 10 minutes to go of the regulation 90 or even in extra time? Who knows what's going to happen tonight? Is he the type of guy who could take that responsibility on his shoulders? Would that fire him up? Who knows? These are all the different things that Neil Lennon's going to be going through, and we'll find out Lenny's team probably around the 6 o'clock mark as well. Mark O'Donnell thinks it's going to be a Beersheva kind of night. Hope I'm wrong, so do I, just for the sake of everybody's well-being, because the nerves were shattered that night. Keltoy 89, we definitely need to go with El Yunusi, preferably behind Edouard in a false 9 attacking midfield role. His talents are neutered out wide. I think they are. We did start talking about that a few weeks back. We were looking at El Yunusi, a player that we rate highly, but we were concerned that he wasn't making the impact that we've seen, you know, in dispatches with Celtic, previously with Ball, sometimes for Norway, and we were looking maybe at a different position. Lawrence Conley suggested bringing him in centre, and also with the fact that his former teammate Ayeti was there. Could they form some kind of relationship and partnership in there? He's come in and he's looked like the £16 million player again, so I think you're right, he's wasted out left. The DJ of choice reckons at £5 million for a loan player for a year, Celtic would rather pay the £5 million for a player on a 4-year contract. Well, you look at what we've got there with a Yeti for the same fee. That's the type of thing that Celtic will be investing in rather than a loan player. And that, I think, is what has been what Sky Sports called problematic around that interest. Excuse me. We also have a point from Meek67. Probably the fee for Sessegnon on loan we could have used to get Hickey in permanently. Sessegnon would be the short-term solution. That is an interesting point, isn't it? So we know, I was going to mention it during the week there, but I didn't get around to it. We know that Hickey had a very impressive debut for Bologna. And he was a player that Celtic were extremely interested in. That was information that was being fed to us. There was only so much we could mention on the show, but we knew that an offer had been made, an offer of wages had been made, and that Bologna, let's just say that they offered a huge amount more than Celtic. And I mean a huge amount, not just double, a lot more than that. And Hickey went to Bologna. As most modern footballers will. And that's just reality, isn't it? But you're right, yeah, we could have put a deal together for Hickey. Would we have spent 5 million on Hickey? That's a big thing. I mean, what was it, 1.6, 1.8 in terms of a transfer fee? Then you're looking at a 3 to 5 year deal, depending on what he was being offered on big wages. Would you have put the £5 million his way or somewhere else? That's a good question, but excellent point, well made. John Francis McKeown, Griff may feature at some point because he's the only natural striker. Eddie is a number 10 in my opinion. Is a number 10 in Strachan's opinion as well, I think, John, which is why we struggle to score against Riga with Eddie and Christie. The out and out striker, Griffiths, is he. He's not fit enough to start, John, but he might find his way on the bench. That would be interesting. I think Sessegnon is getting people excited because, you know, the level that he has played at, and I think he will play at a high level. And I'm not saying Celtic isn't a high level, but he certainly would go back at some stage, and he's only 20. To go for 20 million from Fulham to Spurs, massive move. Another player, similarly, who went from Fulham to a big club for a big fee was Paddy Roberts. What's your thoughts? I keep getting told to get over him. Well, I'm not over him. I still think he could do a job for Celtic. I don't think it would be a big fee, and by that I mean maybe 2 or 3 million quid. Is the ship sailed for him, not just for Celtic? Does he want to come back to Scottish football? I think it would be good for him to get games. I think, again, he needs to get back on his own career path. Seems to have been wandering about on loan deals. His next move needs to be permanent. And if it's at Celtic, I, for one, would be pretty chuffed with that because he can play both wings. I think someone was saying he was more effective on the right, but he can certainly switch left and right. And we've also got a point coming through from Hands Up, Don't Shoot. Got to change that avatar, man. And you're saying, aye, Hickey is a total gamble. Yeah, he was. It was a gamble. And he started off well. And we wish him all the best. He's a very good talent. And we want to see young Scottish talent doing well. He was at Celtic, of course, and Celtic had part of a sell-on clause, so we did benefit, not to the tune of the 4 million that John McVeigh's talking to. Remember, we are £4 million down after the Rogic deal fell through. Yeah, we would have been expecting that £4 million, and plans might have been made based on it. We certainly need to strengthen. We know that. I think we all accept that we need to strengthen. Greg Taylor's doing well. He's still getting some level of criticism, but he's doing well out there. But he is the only option, and we need to get more options on the left-hand side. I wouldn't entertain anything else, really, at the moment, as long as we keep the players who have been subject of speculation, and those players are Edouard, Christie, and Cham, and Ayer. Can we keep all 4? I think if we do, then it shows a real intent on the Celtic board's part, because Celtic are obviously suffering financially, as are all clubs in different ways. And there's been a suggestion that we need to actually sell a player to fill in the gaping wound of the pandemic. To the tune of what is the question? Because what we've got there is we've got Encham, we've got Christie, and we've got Ayer. What would they command? Would each of those players command more than 10 million? I'd be disappointed if we sold them for any less than that. What do we need? What do we need to bridge that gap of the pandemic losses? Edouard, we're not going to get what we all think he's worth at this moment in time. So don't sell him on the cheap would be, my mantra over the next 4 or 5 days. And if that means that obviously Edouard gets his move eventually after 10 in a row, but we maximise that move, then it's worth waiting for. we are looking at a situation where we may lose one of the other three in Ajer, in Cham and Christie. And of those three, I think the one we need to keep is Ajer. People disagree with that. He's got his faults and I know it. But we lose Ajer for 14, 15 million pounds, which are some of the actual fees that we've seen speculated on. Then we need to bring in another defender. This is a problem. We can't run as well as Beaton's playing, even though Julian's back from injury, even though El Hamid can cover that area. We can't run with that squad. We're back to the situation we were in before Duffy came in, and we were all screaming for a centre half when Duffy came in. So you're then looking at Christie and Cham. That is the area of the pitch when you consider Turnbull. That's the area of the pitch. And El Yunusi, when Ayeti comes back in fit. That's the area where we could almost afford to lose one. I would rather we didn't. But if we did, who would it be? And that all depends on where there's a firm offer. Now, I'm watching Sky Sports News on a daily basis, the transfer roundup, every single morning, religiously. And I've never heard Celtic mentioned until Sessegnon. Never heard them until Sessegnon. So, are there clubs down there who really are interested? Are Southampton interested in Cham? Are Burnley interested in Christie? Are Arsenal / Aston Villa interested in Edouard? Who knows? Celtic keep their cards close to their chest. So let's see. If we were to lose one of them, as I say, I would much rather it was one of the more offensive players and not Edouard. I mean Christie and Cham, although I'd rather keep the both of them. So that's my view. Keep all your comments coming in because we do read them even after the bulletin's finished, and we are coming to a close at the moment. Keep them coming in because we will be back for pre-match. We're coming back at 6:30 tonight with Stevie Mullen, the St Roch's president. We'll be joining you for your half-time thoughts and your post-match reaction. So thank you every single one of you, because when I go solo, it's Thursday work. But it's only interesting because you are involved in that. So thank you all for joining me, and I'll see you again at 6:30 for a Celtic State of Mind.